Print some more.
This is something else.
Now let me hear Al. Al, thank you.
We can, so we can make time. Put 'em on.
So who you would have to do it? Is that a call you can make?
Um,
Put it to you, so you suggest it.
no, ask the other bit and just touch base with the pyramid. Yeah, I have, yeah. Just continue. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Everybody got at least 2 statements in front of them? Just one? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, members, we will resume, and the Premier will present his statement on the Tax Reform Commission. Mr. Premier, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to provide an update to this Honorable House on the Tax Reform Commission. Honorable members may recall the Tax Reform Commission was established under the Tax Reform Commission Act 2017 with an aim of advising the government of any measures to advance Bermuda's system of taxation and revenue collection. The Commission will act in accordance with the functions set out under Section 5 of the Act and the terms of reference agreed with myself as Minister of Finance. In accordance with the Act, the Commission shall examine Bermuda's tax system for the purpose of determining any measures that may be taken to best enable a system of taxation and revenue collection that is equitable, effective, efficient, competitive, and transparent, and prepare and submit its reports and recommendations. Mr. Speaker, in this year's budget statement, I explained the Tax Reform Commission will be impaneled to look at the changes imperative to our existing system of domestic taxation to ensure that it is in line with the requirements of the global minimum tax, while also examining what other changes to our local tax are needed to ensure Bermuda's economy remains competitive. Mr. Speaker, significant work has been done. And since that time, including establishing an international tax working group to examine the best way to implement the new global minimum tax in Bermuda and provide recommendations on these matters. The International Tax Working Group completed the first phase of their work in July 2023 and submitted their recommendations to the government. Having assessed the recommendations of the working group, the government began its consultation period by issuing a consultation paper on the proposed new corporate income tax regime. The government is currently in the third and final phase of the consultation period and expect the proposed corporate tax to be effective for 2025. It should be emphasized that the proposed corporate income tax would only apply to Bermuda businesses that are part of multinational enterprise groups with an annual revenue of 750 million euros or more, or who will otherwise be required to pay tax under the global minimum tax to another jurisdiction. Mr. Speaker, I am cautiously optimistic of the potential this material change Bermuda's approach to taxation may bring, as it presents a real opportunity to significantly reduce the cost of living and the cost of doing business by eliminating existing taxes and customs duties. That's right, Mr. Speaker. Many successive governments have struggled with the challenge of tackling the cost of living in Bermuda, and this government is currently reforming our tax system, which has the potential to significantly reduce our cost of living. Mr. Speaker, the Commission will review data and other input from the working group as part of their deliberations and include these findings in the report and recommendations. The Commission is being asked to consider and recommend a set of policy options with the aim of causing the Bermuda tax system, and I will read these matters, Mr. Speaker, which are in line with the terms of reference, to share the payments and benefits fairly and equitably, to maintain, if possible, enhance Bermuda's global competitiveness, to broaden the tax base, reduce variability of payments, and consider alternate forms of taxes, to reduce the impact of taxes on the costs of living in Bermuda, and to consider how earners below a threshold of income might benefit from reduced taxes, and to consider how the governor's revenue management can be improved, including appropriate guardrails and approaches to fiscal optimization. Mr. Speaker, as previously reported in this Honorable House, the Commission will be chaired by Mr. Jaron Johnston, who is a highly reputable individual, notably with over 30 years' experience in the financial services industry. As a reminder, Mr. Johnston was previously the CEO of PricewaterhouseCoopers Limited, Caribbean region, and is currently the Chief Operating Officer of Orbis Investments and a Director of Orbis Holdings Limited and other subsidiaries. The other tax reform commissions members are Mr. Albert Benchimol, the International Business Representative, who is the former president and CEO of Axis Capital Limited and currently serves as a strategic advisor. Mr. Brian Holdit, JP, the Progressive Labor Party representative, and who is currently corporate and finance counsel at MJM. Mr. Douglas Zacuto, JP, the One Bermuda Alliance representative, and who currently serves as the OBA Shadow Finance Minister. Mr. Chris Ferbert, JP, the Bermuda Trade Union Congress representative, who is currently the president of the Bermuda Industrial Union. Mr. Jonathan Howes, representing the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Bermuda Press Limited. Honorable members should note that the commission will consist of an additional member that will be named later. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that this highly qualified and experienced group of individuals who will take forward this task critical to Bermuda's continuing success. I have faith and hope that each commissioner will respect the integrity of their deliberations and keep all communications internal until the appropriate time. I'm further confident that Bermuda and its economy will reap significant benefits from the work undertaken by this commission, and I certainly look forward to receiving the report and the recommendations which will be contained therein during this parliamentary session. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would again like to thank the commission members for agreeing to provide this important service to the Bermuda community. I must also express my appreciation to the members of the International Tax Working Group who have invested considerable time and effort to create the framework for the new corporate income tax regime and whose deliberations and input have now created a strong and comprehensive foundation for the Tax Reform Commission to build on. All this work, and that to be done by the Commission, will no doubt allow the government to continue its work to create a better and fairer Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Premier. The next ministerial statement is from the Minister of Education, Mr. Rebane. Minister, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to provide this House and the listening public with an update on education reform. Mr. Speaker, honorable members would have heard in the speech from the throne that this government remains steadfastly committed to education reform. It should come as no surprise that the opening remarks of the throne speech, the very first statements, were focused on education reform. I would like to use a statement from the speech delivered by Her Excellency, the Governor, to remind honorable members and the listening public of the critical role education reform plays in ensuring our country makes genuine progress. Her Excellency stated, and I quote, "It takes time to deliver and get right, but the government maintains that education reform is vital to the growth and development of our community. Education is the foundation of any society's success." Mr. Speaker, while that might be our future, an education system that can provide our students with the necessary tools to thrive and succeed in their own country and in the global economy that our island home is very much a part of, let me start by going back in time in response to some of the questions the team and I have been receiving about the latest recruitment round for school transformation teams. Mr. Speaker, some of us may recall the events of May 2021, when the first round of recruitment of school transformation teams for Cedar Bridge Academy and the Barclay Institute was gazetted. Over 90 expressions of interest were received, and from those expressions of interest submissions, more than 60 participants were inducted and onboarding and began the rigorous work of co-designing the features of our new signature schools and the curriculum and learning experiences for the 4 signature learning programs on offer. Mr. Speaker, 2 outstanding professionals, Dr. Jamie Bacon and Alex Ammett, both of the Bermuda Zoological Society, put their hands up to be part of this new way of working for our system and our country. While they had both demonstrated a long-term commitment to children and young people of Bermuda through the programs offered at the zoo and the aquarium, they were both willing to lean into something more systemic something that had the potential to transform outcomes, specifically targeting a wider student demographic. Mr. Speaker, over the next 14 months, these two outstanding professionals, with the support of Dr. Ian Walker at BAMS, Bermuda Aquarium Museum and Zoo, spent hours each week working alongside our teachers, leaders, young people, and organizations that represent them, parents, and other business and community partners, painstakingly designing, testing, and reimagining what high school in Bermuda could really be. I remember stopping at the cafeteria at Cedar Bridge Academy on a rainy Thursday evening where these teens were robustly debating whether Bermuda's children and young people were ready to embrace these new opportunities, that they deserve nothing less, and what would happen if we didn't redesign learning, and what it would truly take to make this work come to life. Mr. Speaker, in September 2022, the first S1 students entered these new signature learning programs at Cedar Bridge Academy and the Barclay Institute. These same businesses and community partners welcomed the students on their first day and worked alongside their classroom teachers in the first few weeks. Their role did not end when the curriculum was done. It had just begun. Drs. Amit, Dr. Bacon, and their colleagues, Dr. Toro and Ms. Holmes, have been instrumental in delivering the STEM signature learning program at Cedar Bridge Academy. You will find our students conducting field work alongside these industry professionals and blending theory and practice now that they see how the knowledge they have gained is applied in the real world. You will see them accessing hands-on real-world learning opportunities that enable them to develop the skills, knowledge, and relationships to follow their passions, build on their talents, and achieve their career and further education aspirations. Mr. Speaker, we understand that assessing the effects of our initiatives on the educational system will require time. However, we diligently monitor improvements to ensure that they benefit the youth and the broader Bermuda community. To facilitate this, we conducted surveys with every S1 student, parent, and teachers at two critical intervals during the last academic year, after the first and second semesters. I plan to give a detailed ministerial statement on these findings later this year upon completion of the final report. Meanwhile, I am pleased to offer some preliminary findings with honorable members and the listening public. Mr. Speaker, after a year of implementing the initial set of signature learning programs, the data from our monitoring and evaluation efforts displays the following positive indicators. Approximately 75% of students enjoy what they are studying in the signature learning programs. Some may ask, why is this important? Enjoyment matters as it leads to motivation, and motivation leads to achievement. Approximately 70% of our students believe signature learning program courses help them build on their talents and capabilities. This is significant as the courses have been structured so students have strength-based, personalized pathways where we move away from a one-size-fits-all approach. Approximately 70% of students believe signature learning program teachers and coursework challenge them to do the best. This matters as the appropriate level of challenge is one of the strongest predictors of academic performance. Continuous monitoring and feedback, including insights from signature school principals, indicate that student engagement is high in signature learning program courses, as seen by a decrease in exam retakes and late assignment submissions compared to non-signature learning program courses. Furthermore, these reports suggest that academic performance is improving. This information, highlighting both strengths and areas needing development, is guiding us in our goal to become an adaptive learning system that utilizes real-time feedback for ongoing enhancement. Mr. Speaker, you may wonder why I have been telling this story. What has it got to do with Her Excellency's speech from the throne last week? Well, it is because at the same time, we released the expression of interest process for the latest round of school transformation team recruitment. At this time, my colleagues who sit in this place and in another place have received many questions and concerns. Questions such as, are they, the Ministry of Education, recruiting again because everyone involved in this has left? Or shouldn't this have been done by now? Why aren't we just implementing it? Or why do we need more people to get involved? We even had an official press release by the One Bermuda Alliance, co-signed by the Shadow Minister of Education, suggesting that the recruitment process was a backtrack on the part of the Ministry of Education and the ongoing parish primary school site selection rescoring process. Mr. Speaker, we will need to recruit. induct, and onboard school transformation teams each year until all continuing schools are transitioned. We won't just work with those schools for the period they are open. We will continue to work with them for between 3 and 5 years following. Why? Because that's how change is sustained. That is how we ensure we do not repeat the mistakes of the past, where new ideas become fads that come and go without ever changing the outcome or trajectories of our children. Mr. Speaker, education reform needs every single citizen to be involved. We need more doctors, Bacon, Amit, Walker, and Toro, and Ms. Holmes. We need more like Ms. Coddington from KPMG. We need more like Mr. Smith from Coombe Consulting. We need more educators and leaders like De Silva, Dublin, Rick Douglas, Ferber Jacobs, and Waldron, and I could go on, that have been involved in these design teams from the very outset. We need more parents like Simmons Carey, who's a parent at Barclay Institute. We need more of Bermuda. Bermuda, we need you. Mr. Speaker, I'll finish where I began with a quote from Her Excellency from the throne speech. It takes time to deliver, to get right, but government maintains that education reform is vital to the growth and development of our community. Education is the foundation of any society's success. I urge members to let those words sink in when considering whether or not you take up the opportunity to join a school transformation team as we take education reform forward in Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Rebane. The next ministerial statement is from the Honorable Minister Jason Hayward. Minister Hayward, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise before this honorable House today to address the status of housing in Bermuda and to share with honorable members that this government is committed to ensuring there is a sustainable supply of accessible and affordable housing for all who want and need it. Mr. Speaker, currently there is an acute housing shortage, which is a result of the current demand of housing outpacing the current supply. Given our stated desire to increase the number of jobs in our economy, leading to a larger working population, the expansion of Bermuda's housing stock will be necessary to accommodate a greater number of individuals working in Bermuda. The strong private sector housing market, along with legislation controlling the rents of a sizable portion of Bermuda's housing stock, has up until now ensured a sustainable housing supply required for the population's housing needs. While the government facilitated the development of Bermuda's real estate market, the private sector was the driver of the inventory growth, and the economy was less reliant on government for Bermuda's housing stock. Mr. Speaker, as a result of the reduction in the supply of the private sector housing across the island, Bermuda is now facing what can be considered a housing crisis. The decrease in supply is also driving up the cost of rental accommodations. This housing challenge presents a risk to Bermuda's economic development initiatives, of which the government is determined to mitigate. Mr. Speaker, to help resolve the housing problem, various policies and interventions are needed at distinct levels, relying on both private and public sector involvement to garner solutions. As such, the government will support the expansion of residential dwellings in economic empowerment zones. The City of Hamilton will play a significant role in the expansion of residential development opportunities. The City of Hamilton Plan 2023 recognizes that residential development is an essential component of revitalizing the city. This presents an untapped opportunity to grow the residential population in the island's capital, thereby creating a vibrant economic hub where persons can live, work, and play. Mr. Speaker, approved residential schemes are development proposals that are either fully comprised of residential units or are mixed-use developments comprised of both commercial spaces and residential units. These schemes are an economic development tool that provide a tangible mechanism and pathway to bring the development vision and objectives of the local plan to life within the economic empowerment zones. The Northeast Hamilton Local Plan 2022, prepared by the Department of Planning in partnership with the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, regulates the development and use of land in Northeast Hamilton. Currently approved residential schemes are restricted to the economic empowerment zones in Somerset, St. George's, and Northeast Hamilton. However, it is now necessary to expand the areas where approved residential schemes can be constructed. Therefore, the government will seek to expand the eligibility for approved residential schemes from solely the economic empowerment zones to the entire city of Hamilton. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to providing $15 million over the next 3 years to build more affordable public housing units. In addition, the Ministry of Public Works, through the Bermuda Housing Corporation, is undertaking the renovation retrofit of 137 older residential units to increase the amount of affordable housing options for Bermudians. 60 of these units are presently occupied and will undergo minor to medium refurbishments. The remaining 77 are units representing the entire stock of vacant and derelict units that require major retrofits. These 77 units will be added to the Bermuda Housing Corporation rental unit inventory, bringing the total to 777 units. These newly added units are set to be priced under the rent geared to income scheme, which is capped at 35% of the total household income. This program allows for low and middle income families to afford a quality standard of living, as well as save 10% of their housing income. Mr. Speaker, there has been significant infrastructure investment by the Ministry of Public Works to help increase the stock of affordable housing throughout the country. As of September 2023, the efforts to increase the Bermuda Housing Corporation stock include the following: 3 Walkover Lane, 5 on Jenny Lane, Harmony Block B, Harmony Block D and E, 27 Beacon Hill, 22 Battery Road, 18 and 20 Battery Road, Chelsea Apartments, 1 Grandstand Lane, Regent House, St. George's, Wellington Road, St. George's. Mr. Speaker, this government will encourage and support housing developments in residential zones as highlighted in the Bermuda Plan and specific plans for other geographical areas. The Department of Planning's records indicate that there is a total of 582 parcels or 181 acres of vacant residential 1, residential 2, or rural land without conservation area development restrictions. The data analysis for housing demand and supply indicate that there is ample land available if required to meet housing demand within existing residential zoned areas, as well as the mixed-use zones and the city of Hamilton. It is therefore not essential to zone any new land as residential. Mr. Speaker, the current Morgan's Point site is targeted for conversion into a mixed-use site for the development of a range of residential rental apartments, including components for seniors housing. With an active and engaging amenities district, this project will positively impact Bermuda's residential rental market and the overall economy. Mr. Speaker, the first phase of this project should partially address this deficiency in supply by adding 101 units within 2 to 3 years with the capacity to scale up. This development will include an amenities village containing dining and retail businesses, a farmer's market, a boardwalk, of all which will be open to the public. At the center of the redevelopment is the concept of live, work, play, all on site. Pricing for the apartment in Morgan's Point amenity district is expected to be affordable. The overall additional supply should help to reduce the cost of residential properties in the broader market. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue its work to support the increase in Bermuda's housing inventory. In this regard, the current environment of an expanding economy presents an opportunity for those seeking to develop. The private housing sector can assist by investing in housing development projects, renovating unused and derelict apartments, and place them back into Bermuda's housing inventory, removing properties from the vacation rental market and making them available to renters. In addition, the banks can assist by partnering with the government to offer favorable mortgage terms to those seeking home ownership, making capital available for potential development projects, and ensuring foreclosed properties are placed back into the housing inventory in a timely manner. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to build on a raft of recommendations for changes to legislation to provide a balance between the needs of landlords as well as those of tenants. This will propose recommended legislative changes that reflect today's rental market with a specific view to clarify critical issues on which the current legislation is silent. No one wants to be disadvantaged by having their properties destroyed or lost due to poor tenancy behavior. And conversely, the desire is not to see persons evicted due to poor landlord attitudes and behaviors. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, Bermuda's housing crisis is a complex and multifaceted issue that requires a comprehensive, coordinated, and collaborative approach from various stakeholders and sectors. There is no single solution, but rather a variety of possible solutions that can be tailored to the specific context and needs of Bermuda. Understanding that addressing this crisis will take time, it can be solved by implementing effective and efficient policies and interventions. Resultantly, access to adequate and affordable housing can be realized for all who want or need it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Hayward. The question period. We have one question for the Premier by the Honorable Member Pearman. Mr. Pearman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to you and to the listening public. Thank you, Honorable Premier, for your statement to this Honorable House this morning on the Tax Reform Commission. I just have a question on page 2 of the statement where you state, and with your leave, Mr. Acting Speaker, I quote, "It should be emphasized that the proposed corporate income tax would only apply to Bermuda businesses that are part of multinational enterprise groups with annual revenue of 750 million euros or who will otherwise be required to pay tax under the GMT to another jurisdiction." Does the Premier have a sense of how many entities this will apply to in Bermuda? How many Bermudian entities, MEGs, multinational enterprise groups, will fall into the potential tax bucket?
Mr. Speaker, that information is not with me this time. I know that it has been provided, and I do not want to provide the incorrect information. The number is not, I mean, when we talk about the total number of companies on Bermuda's register, there's about 16,000 of those, 2,000 local, 14,000 international. There are a number that do apply. I don't want to probably say more along the lines around 10% rather than a larger amount than that. I might even get the specific figure, but I will go with around the ballpark around 10%, but I can get the specific information to the honorable member. What I would also like to state is that there's complex modeling and work that is being taken place right now, and those modeling works are going to be provided to the Tax Reform Commission on that specific matter. So those matters are ongoing, so anything I'm providing is an estimate at this time rather than something that is specific.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker, and thank you for the suggestion that the Premier brings that information to the House, and I'm grateful that the Premier has agreed to do so. Just on my math, so if 16,000, if we're talking 10%, I think that means the Premier is in the ballpark of 1,600 or so, but I wait for I'm 1,400 or so. So I wait for that response, but 1,400 or so, but to be confirmed to the House at a later date. Thank you so much. Mr. Premier, second question. Honorable Premier, on the third page of your statement, you speak about the Commission will review data and other input from the working group. I'm just wondering, in terms of the multinational enterprise groups and the data, where is that data being drawn from? Is that being volunteered by these entities, by ABIC, ABER, et cetera, or is that data being drawn from other sources? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask the honorable member to please clarify the question? I couldn't follow it exactly from the reference to the statement. Just want to make sure I got it right.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker, and thank you, Honorable Premier. The reference is on page 3. It's the second paragraph, and it speaks about how the Commission will review data and other input from the working group. And I'm just wondering how that data was gathered and from what sources it was taken in order to determine the number of MEGs or multinational enterprise groups. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, I think the honorable member is trying to draw two things together, which may not exactly be drawn together. As I'd indicated in my previous statement, only thing that is provided at this point in time is estimates. When we're speaking here on page 3, where it says the commissioner reviewed data and other input from the working group is part of their deliberations, this would be all the information of which they have gathered, all the information regarding the suggestions which have come in, additionally information which has come from the modeling which is being taking place to estimate the potential revenue that may derive from the global minimum tax, variable, of course, estimates insofar as baseline and high and low figures. So I think it's referring to that specifically. He's asking whether or not companies have been requested to submit information. I can say that to my knowledge, they have not been.
I'm grateful for that answer. To be fair to the Premier, it was a two-part question, and he did answer one of the parts that companies have not been asked to submit that information. The other part of the question is where, when we're talking about estimates of how many entities might fall into this tax bucket, to use simple language, where are we getting that data from? Those in order to form those estimates, such as the estimate of 1,400, which I appreciate is an estimate. What data are we looking to try to gather that information? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the work that is being done to put together the estimates and projections is being done by an outside accounting firm. There are certain specifics of which and parameters of which they're using. I do not have that information with me, but what I can state is that the Ministry of Finance is confident that the rigor that is necessary to be applied to provide accurate estimates to the Tax Reform Commission is being done.
No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Thank you, Premier.
Thank you, and good morning, colleagues. Just a quick question. This particular statement is pretty much directed towards renting and low-cost housing rental units. Has there been any thought to possibly the same group that's helping with this here look at single unit homes, because we know we have the properties out there available, as mentioned in the statement, and being able to lower the cost of single unit homes for families as well?
That is a good question. The simple answer to the question is yes, but the statement does address both public sector and private sector development. The statement is served to encourage development throughout the island, whether it be in the economic empowerment zones, the wider city of Hamilton, or utilize the rental plots that are available throughout the island, which can be developed.
Second question, on the last page, the minister speaks of recommendations, and one of those recommendations on the last page at the top is removing properties from the vacation rental market and making them available to renters. Has there been any discussion with the rental market, vacation rental markets about this possibility?
Formally from the Ministry of Economy and Labor, no. However, I have met with the real estate division of the Chamber of Commerce, where we recognize that vacation rental units were taken away, part of the inventory that was used to house residents. And we've had those discussions at that level.
Any further questions? The Honorable Member Susan Jackson would like to ask a question also. Ms. Jackson, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. My question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, is on the final page when the minister mentions that he proposes recommended legislative changes, and he sort of referred to some of the tenant landlord issues or bits that may be included in legislation. But I'm also wondering whether the minister will be reviewing the rent control, whether there will be any look to investigate any changes, updates to the Rent Increases Domestic Premises Control Act, 1978. Thanks.
Minister?
There are ongoing consultation and dialogue between the Department of Consumer Affairs and the retail divisions within the Chamber of Commerce, who are responsible for real estate. Those are dialogues which are leading to reform in the Landlord and Tenant Act specifically. We had not delved into the Rent Control Act, but certainly it is something that falls underneath the remit of the Department of Consumer Affairs, but also addresses a wider issue of the cost of living in Bermuda, something that will be discussed, and we have to talk about the cost of housing in Bermuda, and so that is something that can be certainly considered.
Thank you, Minister. Any further questions, Ms. Jackson?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That ends the question period. The next item is congrats and obituary speeches. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member Premier David Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we lead off our session today, remembering and understanding that recently this House lost, not this House, but the country lost the former giant of this House, Mr. Speaker. And that would be in the name of Mr. Walter Roberts. And I'd like to certainly associate all members of this honorable House with that. He was unquestionably a remarkable individual who shaped our island's political landscape with his dedication and vision, and of course was very close with the Speaker of this honorable House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Roberts was a man of intelligence and integrity who excelled as a teacher, entrepreneur, family man, leaving a profound impact on those that he encountered. We know that he was elected for the first time in 1963 and won every single general election that he faced in Sands. He served his community and our party well, and also served as deputy leader of the Progressive Labor Party for 11 years in two separate stints. We all in the Progressive Labor Party know and understand how he revolutionized the way in which we approach politics. His attention and to data that was something, and the science of canvassing is something that is still used to this day inside of the Progressive Labor Party. But of course, he was not just a politician. He was also a trailblazer in business, founding Bermuda's first Black-owned insurance company, also later venturing into hospitality. I know that I personally benefited from his wisdom and guidance. I know that the Deputy Premier, as well as we visited with him as he was challenged with his ailments, but his spirit was always bright to the end. And so certainly on behalf of the entire House of Assembly, and I will take the liberty to associate honorable members opposite, I want to expend our heartfelt gratitude to his family for sharing their father with us. And I want to ensure that this honorable House does send an appropriate letter of condolences on this particular occasion. The only other thing I'd like to add, Mr. Speaker, on a matter of congratulations is I would want to send congratulations to Troika Bermuda. And I will associate all honorable members. I'm sure that a number of members did attend the outstanding production of Serafina, where they had to add 3 additional shows that continued to sell out because of how amazing the production was. It was an all Bermudian cast, save and except one person from overseas who did join. But it was certainly immense talent and dedication for the performers, the quality of the production, the quality of the singing. I know that a number of members of this honorable House were also patrons. I know that there were honorable members of this House, specifically the Minister of Youth, Social Development, and Seniors, whose daughter participated in that production. And it was such a joy to see so many young and talented artists in their elements. who put this on and told a very powerful story. So I want to ensure that the Honorable House to send a note of congratulations to Mr. Woolridge, who's the founder of Troika, and those persons who performed. They should be proud of the outstanding job and effort that they put forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. The chair recognizes the honorable member Wayne Keynes.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to offer condolences to the family of Mr. Ison Bud Robinson. Mr. Robinson was born in Bermuda, Mr. Speaker, in 1982. At about 4 years old, Mr. Speaker, he contracted a medical condition called relapsing polychondritis. And this affected him for a number of years, which caused him to have to travel from Bermuda to Canada for treatment and to Leahy in his later years. This seems like it was a sad story, Mr. Speaker, but it wasn't. I attended the funeral, and his mother, Carolyn, his father, Keith, had the room was full of support from the four corners of our country. His family were loving, they were kind. Ison was a member of Bomba. He did racing with the boats in the harbor, the mechanical boats in the harbor. He won Rookie of the Year, Mr. Speaker. He had photography was one of his hobbies, and you can see his pictures all throughout Bermuda. He was also he had a business called Sauce Boss, where he did spicy pepper and he made hot sauce. You can see everybody. I had it in my house where he did loquat and special different types of hot sauce. He also was known for his swizzle, which of course I didn't partake in, but I heard, Mr. Speaker, about the thing that he did. He attended the Prospect Primary School, Friendship Vale. He attended Bermuda Institute, and he graduated from the Cedar Bridge Academy. Ison was a phenomenal man, always in good spirits. His funeral, he had young people from all walks of life in Bermuda. Everyone was there. They celebrated in St. George's afterwards, just sharing the time of his family. Would love for condolences and a letter, Mr. Speaker, to be sent to his mother, Carolyn, and to his father, Keith. Mr. Speaker, I would like to echo in my last 30 seconds the congratulations to the production of Troika. I attended with my family on the last night, the seventh sitting of this, Sarafina. It was a South African musical, as you know. I was grabbed by their accents. I had to look closely to see if those were our kids. They sounded like they were from the yards of Soweto. The acting, the singing, the harmony, the emotion on stage. I was excited to see our young people get baptized in the history of Mandela with Nelson Mandela and Stephen Biko. I can see that it was an experience for these young people. I talked to some of the parents. They said they were finished rehearsal at 9, 10, 11:30. The energy on the stage doing this 7 nights in a row, it was truly, and I hate to use Broadway words, a triumph. It was a triumph not only for the legacy of South Africa, but for our young people. Mrs. Selden Woolridge said, oftentimes people speak negatively about our young people. That, Mr. Speaker, has to be dispelled when we saw the best of our young people in Troika. My congratulations to the parents, to the family, to everyone who was involved, specifically the cast, the crew, and everyone who was involved in the production. Simply fantastic. I was there, a standing ovation for almost 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honorable member Renee Ming from St. George. Ms. Ming, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and listening audience. This morning I bring obituary prayers and thoughts. Mr. Speaker, St. George's University, where my heart is, has suffered over the last probably 6 weeks. So I'll take them in the order that the persons passed. I would like to remember Mrs. Sandra Monis. For those of you who are from St. George's, you would know Miss Monis. She was strong 7-day Adventist.
Amen.
But she watched a lot of the St. George's children. Unfortunately, I had on Lucy. You either went to Miss Monis or you went on Lucy or you went on NG and Miss Dean. It was just like that. That's just how St. George sees us. But you went to one of them, and they were old-time babysitters. And I do recall when one time Miss Monis saw me putting up a fence to stop my son from doing something when he was a baby, and she said to me, "Are you crazy? You put that fence up? You just tap his fingers when he goes over to touch that thing." That's old school. You know, me as a young mother, I'm thinking, I'm like, stop him from getting over there, then I'll have to worry about him getting over there. her way of training was very
It works.
different. You know, she said, you just tap their
Yes.
hand. They know not to go over there.
That's right.
So I used to appreciate some of the notes that she would give you from in terms of motherhood, because she had been a mother to so many. And I'd like for her husband of many, many years to know that he's in our thoughts and prayers, and her children as well. And I also want to give obituary prayers and thoughts to, I'm gonna say his full name, because believe it or not, I found it out at his funeral. Charles Joseph Smith. Everybody in St. George's knew Uncle Sonny. Everybody we were going to look for his obituary. I said, his name, Charles Joseph, you guys? But he had been around my Anderson family for years. He was really good friends with my Uncle Louis.
Mhm.
And I believe he worked at the hotel in St. George's for many years. So you may know him, Acting Deputy Speaker,
Mhm.
Acting Speaker, sorry. And he passed in September as well. And he will be missed as a fixture around St. George's on the square at his regular seat at Richard Allen AME Church as well. And I'd
Mhm.
also like to let the family of Nina Smith. Nina was St. George's hairdresser. Anybody in St. George's that didn't get their hair done via Nina at some point in time. She was young and she suffered from cancer, and it's unfortunate, but she has left a legacy. She has 3 wonderful children, and St. George's will remember the life that Nina brought to St. George's. She's actually from Somerset. She hailed from Somerset, but she came to St. George's when she got married.
Yes.
So she's been converted, and
Yes, indeed.
yes, and she spent a good portion of 20 or 30 years down in St. George's.
Oh, no.
And I'd just like to be associated with the comments for Ison Robinson.
How you do?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any further speakers? The chair recognizes the honorable member, Mr. Kennier. Mr. Kennier, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Acting Speaker. I'd like to also add my condolences to the passing of Sandra Monis, Aunt Sandra. I spent a lot of weekends in her home in Pathfinders with her sons and her daughter, who actually went to high school with me abroad when we went. So what a loss. Unfortunately, I was away at the time, but our condolences do go out to the family. They were a staple in St. George's. Everyone knows the Monis family. So the passing of her doesn't go by easy. Also on condolences, I'd also like to send out condolences to David Pugh. Many probably remember
Yes.
from August, BAS and the likes. This was someone who
We do
very
the Full
social.
House.
Yeah, I'd love to sit down and have a wine with you and chat. And he was a major part of establishing my branch in constituency 12. And so to his wife and family, we send condolences. His passing, our funeral was yesterday, and I know that one of our members at least attended. On a higher note, I just want to say that hopefully we can get out early this evening, because the under-13s, Dendytown and North Village, are duking it out in the finals. My grandson plays for Dendytown, so I want to be able to attend his final match at 8 o'clock tonight. So good luck to the teams tonight. There's
Yes.
2 very, very, very good teams, all squaring it off in the under-13s, and well coached and managed, I must say. Both clubs are doing a fantastic job with our young people in football.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kennier. Any other members? The chair recognizes the honorable member Susan Jackson. You have the floor, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to take a few moments to be associated with the passing of Walter Roberts. He
Yes.
was a very close family friend of my parents, and I grew up as I was remembering with his 2 daughters, Karen and Lisa. We kind of grew up running around the kitchen table while all of the family adults sat at the kitchen table, solving all the problems of the world and Bermuda in particular. And so I did spend many, many years enjoying living and running free around his guest house property as the little kids in the punt boats. But then many years later, I found that the family had moved their homestead to the constituency of Pembroke Southwest. And so
Mm.
I have had them
Exclusive.
in my constituency as my constituents for a few years now.
Mm.
And so it was very nice to be able to have those visits and be able to
Right.
join in and reconnect with the family at our later stage in life. And so it was very sad, but at the same time, Walter Roberts was so prepared that everything was handled, which did take away some of the mourning. But I certainly do send condolences to the family. My heart is with them now and always. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member Jackson. The chair recognizes the Honorable Jamal Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. I rise today to pay tribute to the person one of the people I've succeeded in the Sands South Constituency 33 area, Mr. Walter Roberts, a giant in Sands politics, a man of the people, a man of humility. We've all covered the resume and the life and the biography, but I think the most important point that I would like to touch on today is the work he used and the knowledge he attained and the thought that went into converting all of Sands into Progressive Labor Party seats. To sit down there and see how other countries did it, establish the first database, and establish canvassing practices and things that still benefit and work today. And so it was interesting because there's one short story that I would like to share. When it comes to campaigning and canvassing, I steal a little bit from everybody. And there were things that Mr. Roberts taught me. There are things that my father taught me. There are things that a former member of this chamber, the Honorable Dale Butler, taught me. So one day I said to, Dale Butler, I was sitting next to him. I said, hey, he said, oh, you did something, that's cool. I like that. I said, no, I got that from you. And he said to me, you know where I got that from, right? I said, who? He said, I got that from your father. So I told my dad, I was excited. Oh, look, this thing's going. He said, no, I got that from Walter Roberts. So that is the legacy. There are things that we still do to this day based on the work that he was doing in the 60s and the 70s and into the 80s, converting what at the time were UBP strongholds into PLP strongholds. So I'm very thankful for the time that he spent from his business and his family. I'm thankful for the strategic mind and the development of ideas to move things forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Honorable Member Scott Simmons. Mr. Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to honorable members. Mr. Speaker, I rise in this honorable house asking that, joining my colleagues in certainly giving our condolences to a friend of the family, someone that I knew for a very, very, very long time. Those in the Seventh-day Adventist community certainly would know, certainly from the East End, would know Sandra Monis. And her son was a classmate of mine. Her daughter was in my sister's class. I recognize that the entire Seventh-day Adventist community appreciate the work that she did. She was in the community of Seventh-day Adventists, a quiet individual who took care of our children, took care of the church, and believed that the only reason for living was to serve God. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise in this honorable house in honor of her, a quiet giant in her community, a person of absolute substance. Mr. Speaker, I also rise in this honorable house. It would be certainly wrong if we in this honorable house did not, all of us, get up and speak about Walter Roberts. For the few moments that I do have, for the time that I spent and have spent in the Progressive Labor Party, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Roberts has been present and he has influenced us. As a young person back then coming into the Progressive Labor Party, he epitomized, along with so many others, the very meaning, the very substance of what the Bermuda Progressive Labor Party was. To honor him today, to honor him at his funeral, to give a sufficient and an adequate eulogy for him speaks to the man, the mission, and the substance of just who he was. So we give praise to him today. We send condolences to his family. And Mr. Speaker, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Chair recognizes Honorable Hussein De Silva.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like the House to send condolences to Mr. Millard Shauna Simons from Somerset, Associate the Premier, and also the Hill House. Thank you very much. China was a good friend of mine, and because we have so many to catch up on, I'm not going to go into too many details.
Yes, and
but
3 minutes.
He, myself, and a few others up Somerset formed the Wesleyan Runners Club many years ago. And he'll be sadly missed. His son, Leonard China Simons Jr., gave a very good tribute, one that you don't see often in church, one that will be remembered. Whilst I'm on my feet, I would also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, like the House to send condolences to the family of Sheila Burroughs. Sheila, as everyone knows, was the stalwart behind former member Reggie Burroughs and Associate Premier in the whole House. Oh, she's already been done. Okay, well, that was when I was off island. So I associate with that. And of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you know that Sheila and I had a special relationship. So I will miss her dearly. The other thing I would like to do is the House to give condolences to Ms. Gio Monis, who wasn't a great fan of her MP down there in Devon Heights, but certainly she will be missed. She is the mother of my partner, Stephen Monis. And as you will know, she lost her husband, the former Assistant Commissioner, Monis, earlier this year. So I suspect up in heaven now wishing that they had voted for PLP when they were here. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, I also like to give a quick mention to my aunt Letice Wells from Loyal Hill. She passed recently and she was funeralized last week. Now, Mr. Speaker, I can't take my seat without giving associated remarks of Mr. Walter Roberts. Of course, I'll tell you all a quick story. I dated his daughter once. He said, okay. I knocked on the door. Then here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, he said, okay, what you doing? And I said, well, I'm come to have a date with, I won't call her name, one of your daughters. He said, oh, yeah, I expected you. You sit in that chair. I'll sit in this chair. And she's going to sit in that chair over there.
Yeah.
So, but certainly I will miss him. He was a mentor of many in this house, many around the island, and I was one of them. Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence,
Quickly,
I-
your 3 minutes.
really,
stop.
really quickly, Cully Buds, and I'll declare my interest. Cully Buds had another record that topped the billboards in the reggae albums, and I'd like to send him congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. To recognize the honorable member Kim Swan. Brother Swan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to be associated with the condolences to cousin Walter Roberts, an icon of the Somerset Bridge community, who was the first Southampton Glebe to get elected to Parliament amongst some 10 or 11 of us that have can claim that, including the Speaker of the House. Mr. Roberts was an iconic community figure, and as a young boy growing up there, you couldn't help but admire his stature, the way he carried himself. Karen was in my class at one particular time. I think she skipped ahead with me all, and it was always an honor to be in his presence. He raised me out of Somerset in 1983, and that's why I moved to St. George. Ms. Monis, whose husband is a very dear friend of mine, whose brothers and sisters are closely friends of mine and constituents, and whose aunt married my uncle Stanley Hall. Ms. Nina Smith, who also is from that Roberts family. So that Roberts family in that week lost two family members. And I ran into her mother at the bank in Somerset after I finished cousin Walter's funeral. Her mother was in the bank, and I offered her condolences, and she was dealing with a double whammy. That Anderson connection with a lot of girls have a lot of relatives by different names, but the Robertses tend to like to marry Anderson girls. Ison Robinson was one of those youngsters that used to ride across the golf course in the bikes. Young Poochie, the late Travis Smith, Poochie Anderson, and all that crowd. Cousin Doc Hall's grandson and the like. would caused me to make sure that I was on my P's and Q's, making sure they didn't ride on the greens. And also the passing of George Ricky Woolridge, and iconic sportsman, Mr. Arnold Willard, the first Bermudian to play professional football in United Kingdom, who I met when he was working at the Bank of Butterfield alongside of my mom. And finally, the Bermuda foursome playing in the Bermuda Championship, Eric West, Michael Sims, and Scott Roy. But let me not forget my young protege, Oliver Bashard, who I had the honor of teaching between ages of 5 and 10, and orchestrating his current coach, David Ogren, who's shepherded him for the last 5 years, former PGA Tour winner. And at last count, Oliver and Michael Sims were neck and neck going up the ninth hole. And if they could make 3 birdies on the back 9, they could probably make the cut, which is outstanding for a 15-year-old. But I'd say this, he's the second 15-year-old to play from Bermuda. The first one he was with when he was 9 was Kenny Lejour, and both of them were taught by this simultaneously by an old fellow speaking to you today. So I'm very proud to have shepherded that there.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Swan. Any further speakers? The chair recognizes Honorable Michael Weeks.
Good morning, Mr. Acting Speaker. And thank you. Mr. Acting Speaker, I'd like to start off with being associated with the remarks for Mr. Walter Roberts. Mr. Speaker, before I got into politics, I didn't know Mr. Roberts, but once I decided to enter the fray and became a member of the illustrious Green and White, Mr. Roberts offered a lot of different advice, and every time I saw him, he'll give words of encouragement. So his encouraging words will be sorely missed. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to be associated with the remarks for Mr. David Pugh. Mr. Speaker, when I first came back from university many years ago, I worked at August for a few years, and Mr. Pugh was the accounting boss, as you may. So I got a lot of guidance and support from him. And as a former speaker, a former member was up on his feet, he talked about how he's always willing to have a glass of wine with you. He certainly did, Mr. Speaker. He certainly did, especially if he tried to tell you more than once about something that you were doing wrong. He knew that if he can't get it to you from 9 to 5, he'll take you after 5 to one of his favorite haunts. And lo and behold, by next Monday, I got it right. Mr. Speaker, I also would like, on another note, to be associated with the remarks of prior members of Troika and the accident play, Serafina. I remember sitting there with my wife, and when they came out and somebody shouted, "Amen la," and I tried to roll my tongue. For the life of me, I couldn't do it. But like members before me, I really appreciated that. Mr. Speaker, I don't know how much time got left, but I have one. Not much. Okay, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also give congratulations to Mr. Reginald Rayner and the entire staff up at Rayner's Ruby Service Station, Mr. Speaker, for 65 years of service to the island. And I would like to associate the MP of the area, Mr. Sandy Silva, and the MP, his neighbor, and all the other members that all other members that service the gas station. But Mr. Speaker, as I take my seat, I also want to congratulate Mr. Bashard. I remember a few years ago when Mr. Swan was teaching Mr. Bashard, I was also one of his students. And we both did a foursome one time, Mr. Speaker. But I just want to take my hat off to him.
Yeah.
We had a foursome, a golf foursome, Mr. Speaker. Before I take my seat.
Yes, we understand. The chair recognizes the Honorable Deputy Leader Walter Brabant.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. certainly want to be associated with the condolences that were given to Mr. Walter Roberts, a former
Yes.
member of this House. There aren't many members who had the opportunity to work with him, you being one of the few who's left as a parliamentarian. I certainly had extensive years to work with Mr. Roberts prior to his retirement from Parliament, and had the benefit of certainly his leadership in the party, but also his clear instruction in the development of canvassing and other foresights that he had for how the engagement with the voter could be improved and could be mastered. And he certainly is, if there's one singular figure who has helped to shape the effectiveness of the Progressive Labor Party on the doorstep, Mr. Roberts can certainly be attributed to that. He was a visionary in the use of technology, in the method, and in the execution of community engagement and voter engagement. And certainly the history of the PLP will recognize that without a doubt. But certainly his work helped to transform politics in Bermuda, and that is certainly must be recognized. And I am honored to have had the opportunity to work intimately with him and know him quite for certainly my time in the party. And even those who may not have had the benefit of Mr. Roberts's influence directly, this party is where it is because of the work of people like Mr. Roberts, in particular Mr. Roberts. So thank you very much for the
Thank you.
opportunity to give
Thank
that
you.
tribute, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Honorable Richard Pearman. Mr. Pearman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Richard Scott, yes, indeed. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. I know that my honorable colleague, Craig Cannonier, and there you go, there you go. I know that my honorable colleague, Mr. Craig Cannonier, and indeed Minister Weeks have already spoken in memory of David Pugh, who died untimely very recently. And I just want to add a few personal observations. I had the distinct honor and pleasure of serving with David for 15 years on a board here in Bermuda. I think for about 10 of those, he was the chairman. And I did attend his funeral yesterday, and I share with you something said by his family at the funeral, so it doesn't seem that I'm being disrespectful. But they described him as Shrek, who is, of course, the Disney ogre. He was, in fact, a stern man. He could be very firm, but always fair with a heart of gold. And so I think it's okay that if his family have called him a lovable ogre, that I may do so as well. He didn't truck any disbehavior in his meetings when he chaired them. And there was an occasion, I will not name the honorable member, but a former honorable member of this House was frequently late to these meetings. He also sat on the board. And David, at one point, growing weary of this, got up and just locked the door. So he couldn't get into the meeting late again. He was an accountant by training and had a robust and fierce intellect. And the way he did his math was not as I would do it, with taking out my calculator and carefully counting. He would do these immeasurable sums in his head like that. I mean, it really was tremendously impressive. It has already been said publicly and by my learned colleagues, Minister Weeks and Honorable Member Cannonier, that he worked on Argus and BAS, et cetera, et cetera. But as the media recognized, he also was the Bermuda Hospitals Board. He gave a considerable amount of his life. And I can also speak personally that as an accountant, he would often go and offer his accounting services to assist charities to prepare their accounts, which charities are obliged to do. And he would do that quietly and discreetly and without seeking credit for that. And he was a very decent man who was much loved and will be very missed. Thank you, Mr. Acting
Thank
Speaker.
you, Mr. Pearman. The chair recognizes Honorable Member Tyrrell. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and good morning all. Mr. Speaker, let me first associate with two persons that have already been named this morning. The first one, Walter Roberts, who I always thought as a giant of a man. And when I was president of football, he always would pull me aside and give me the lecture of Silver City, reminding me who were the powerhouses of the day at that time. And he also gave me some tips on canvassing as well. So I certainly will certainly miss him as well. He was not right all the time. The other person is young Ison Robinson. I had the pleasure of playing football with his father a very, very long time ago. And Ison used to, run around with us. So I do remember him, and I think he will be missed as well. Mr. Acting Speaker, it's in fact, there are many benefits of living in your own constituency because you get to see them more often, talk with them, and you sort of like build relationships. And 3 persons in my constituency who I often talk to have passed recently, and I certainly would like condolences to go out to the families. The first one was Mr. Walter Franks. Certainly condolences to his wife Mary and family, and certainly daughter Karen, who I've come to know well. The other one, a namesake of mine, Mr. Neville Smith of Railview Lane. He was another one. Always had a joke. He used to work in the gas station, Rubis gas station on South Shore. So on my way home, I would stop by and talk with him as well. So he's another one that certainly I will miss, and I expect, I would hope that condolences can be sent to his family. And the more recent one, Mrs. Dolores Glassford, who was actually my neighbor in Rocklands, who suddenly took sick over the last few months. I'll associate MPs Lawrence Scott. And so I became very friendly with also his daughter and son, Dion and William. So I certainly would like condolences to go out to them. And finally, let me end on a better note, Mr. Speaker. It's not, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's not normal that I do this in terms of bringing birthday greetings, but I have 2 constituents who turned 93 and 94 respectively. And I certainly think those sort of people need to be acknowledged. And the first one is Miss Betty Simons Bean, who went 93, and Mrs. Rose Riley, both in my constituent, who went 94. So I certainly wish them all the best as well. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Thank you. Any further speakers? The chair recognize the leader of the opposition, Chair Richardson. Mr. Richardson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to pass my condolences onto the family of David Benavides of Benavides and Associate. I associate the House. He
Thank
was,
you.
as a young sea cadet, I grew up on the water, and when I tried to get back into sailing later on in life, he was always very encouraging. He was an avid sailor, but he was also obviously well known as being an award-winning architect, and so our condolences go out to the Benavides family. I'd also like to associate myself with the comments relating to David Pugh. Mr. Speaker, when I started my company, a little small regulatory consulting shop, I was going up against the likes of the big 4, like the KPMGs and other advisory shops, and a lot of people wouldn't give you a time of day, would not give you a chance. David Pugh gave me not just one chance, but multiple chances, and I really built up my practice from people like David giving a young man a chance to prove his skill at the craft. So he will be missed. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, condolences to the Cook family, Patsy, Ian, and Melanie, on the passing of David Cook, a retired police inspector, member of Ex-Police Officers Association, or EXPO. Inspector Cook served in Western and Central Divisions in CID, was a sergeant in 73, an inspector in 88, and retired as second in command of operations. He was active in police boxing, putting on not only boxing himself, but putting on a number of those functions. He will be missed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. And the chair recognizes the Honorable Member Levita Fogo from St. George.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to be associated with the remarks from Mrs. Moniz, a matriarch of St. George's, a lady who did take care of many of the young ones who are now adults themselves. But one of her granddaughters has continued her craft of nurturing young people, and indeed is the care provider for my youngest grandchild. And so her family needs to know that all St. George's are there mourning along with them and are grateful for the service that she provided to our community. Mr. Ison Robinson.
Mhm.
Mr. I am a proud grandmother, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say that.
You are, I didn't know that.
Mr. Ison Robinson. I taught Ison, and Ison will be missed. And, you know, Ison was able to survive into his 40s because if anyone knew the ailment, and the member, Mr. Keynes, did share with the ailment that he suffered from. Ison enjoyed life, but he lived longer than anyone ever anticipated that he would. And he had a full and wholesome life in spite of his illness. And so our hearts go out to the family, the Robinson family, Outerbridge family, and St. George's. Mr. Speaker, I would like to give congratulations to Mrs. Lalani Simmons, and I would like to associate the Minister for Education with these remarks. Robin Diallo. So Leilani has proven her football talents time and time again. And indeed, she was one of the, I'd like to associate the Premier with these remarks as well. I'd like to associate the House, Mr. Acting Speaker. She indeed was one of those who were playing and contributed to the success of the women's football team for her school in the United States. They are the champion team in the United States for females. I believe it's Florida State. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Mr. Speaker, last but not least, Mr. Walter Roberts. Everybody has spoken about this giant of a man, and I would like to be associated with him. And I ask your indulgence as well, Mr. Speaker, for 5 more seconds just to simply
You
say,
need to say what you got to say.
thank you, to simply say that I am glad to have received his education when it comes to politics, because I did get to be a member of a special lunching club, the only female, and I benefited greatly from all those giants who are part of that club. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Acting
you.
Speaker.
The chair recognizes Honorable Anthony Richardson. Mr. Richardson,
Good.
you have the floor.
Morning, Mr. Acting Speaker, and to the listening audience and my fellow colleagues. I will do my 3 minutes. First of all, to add to the comments for the Honorable Walter Roberts, my recollection of Mr. Roberts when I first came into the PLP many years ago actually was he always had a smile on his face and was very welcoming to young people. And he always had a word of encouragement and advice. And so I take that as part of his legacy. Mr. Speaker, from my constituency number 7, Hamilton South, I want to acknowledge the passing of Ms. June Beek recently, her family. She was funeralized a couple of weeks ago now, and I see the Minister Diallo Rabane wants to be associated with that also, Mr. Speaker. And I'll mention briefly, there are so many people in the constituency, Mr. Speaker, as we know that Bermuda is blessed to have many people with good genes, very strong genes. And so in my constituency, I won't just mention the names. I won't tie the numbers with the names, but I will say that the range is from as high as age 90 down to age 60, that I'll mention today. And those persons include Miss Elise Outerbridge, Mr. Pernell Grant, Miss Ann Smith, Miss Mary Tolbert, and Mr. Leon Neron, and also Miss Lucille Lambert. And to those that are in the listening audience, of course, there are many others, and it's always a challenge when you try to mention as many as possible because you miss people out, but that is obviously not the intention. Mr. Speaker, what I really want to do at this stage also is take these last few time to fully recognize that Miss Renita Reed, I know Renita from way back then, her formal name now is Renita T. Bachwe. And I'm mentioning her because both she and Chef Sudesh are the new owners and operators of Cafe Olé. That Cafe Olé is represented or is physically at Crystal Caves. And I mention this because Renita or the Reed family were certainly well known for anybody that lived in Bermuda going way, way back. Remember the pink store on the corner down on Malapeter, where you could always go and get truly what was one of the best meat pies in Bermuda. My personal one was always the beef pies, but you can also get on the sweet side a lemon pie. And I know that there was an attempt for the tradition to be passed on, and so Renita, they're not listening right now, but I truly pray that she's able to bring that back and that we can all taste once again that tremendous Reed's beef pie and others that maybe people will be tempted to. She is joined by Chef Sudesh as she continues on that tradition. And again, I trust that we'll all be patrons, go by and taste and taste and taste again as they go from strength to strength. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. The chair recognizes Honorable Diallo Rubain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the honorable member Anthony Richardson did, I would like to be associated with condolences for June Beek and her family. Recently, Kingsley, her husband, passed, and condolences go out to their daughters, Lillian and Kanika. I also like to send condolences to the family of Jason Bailey. He's a young man that actually I grew up with. He wasn't originally from Frog Alley, Speaker, but he moved there from Somerset, and he was part of the Double Soul family. And unfortunately, he did pass at the age of 53 earlier this year. He leaves behind to mourn two sons, who Jason Jr. and Jaya, who are cousins of mine as well. Also, Mr. Speaker, joining, I'd like to be associated with the condolences for Shina Simons. Although we did speak of that, we do. It was a double day of tragedy in the Department of Education, where Dr. Riddell Tankard's mother passed in the morning, and China's dad passed in the afternoon of the same day. And so our condolences go out to both of those particular families, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also in my own constituency, I have Letice Wells of Vesey Street and Marie Thompson of Tribe Road number 1, and condolences to their families. Mr. Speaker, on a much lighter note, I would like to congratulate the Berkeley Girls Senior Six-a-side team that won the Six-a-side tournament early this week, and also the BHS Middle School Girls team that won the Six-a-side tournament earlier this week as well. Joining in the congratulations to Lalani, who does play for FSU in the ACC conference, and they did once again for the second time in a row, second year in a row, win that conference. And I'll be following her. Last year they went on to win the U.S. College National Championship. So hopefully they'll go further this time. I remember my days of going to school in Tallahassee, Florida, where Florida State is, and there was no such thing as women's sport, especially in soccer, back in the late 80s when I was there. So it's a good advancement to see them doing as well as they are. Mr. Speaker, also congratulations going out to the Youth Climate Summit, which begins today, which will be conducted down at BUBI, both in person and online for our high schoolers and middle schoolers. So I wish them much success as they move forward with that critical area that affects all of us, although we may not notice it or take time to recognize it. But the Youth Climate Summit is a invaluable exercise that happens on an annual basis. Lastly, but not least, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure you will join me in this, and congratulations to the Cleveland County boys who will be celebrating prize giving for the junior cricket team this evening. So we send congratulations to those young men that will be awarded prizes tonight.
Yes, they're the best. Any further speakers? Minister Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. First of all, Mr. Acting Speaker, I'd like to associate myself with the comments in regards to Mr. David Benavides and Mr. Arnold Woolard. Mr. Benavides, as was stated, was an award-winning architect. But in about 2002, standing on the property at the end of Perimeter Lane, members of the Housing Corporation said, what can we do with this property? And we decided to find out how many units we could put on this property. I think the number was 64. And we said, no, that's too dense for this area, but we'll go with a number around 38. So we said, let's make a competition of this. So we reached out to about 12 architects. The number who actually will participate ended up being about 4. And the award or the design that was selected by the Housing Corporation was that of Mr. Benavides. So, you know, many people may not know that, but we have the perimeter lane development that was his design. Mr. Woolard struck fear in opponents on the football field, local pitches, so much so that he was the first Bermudian to play professionally in England. Some people will argue the UK, but I was specific to say he was the first Bermudian to play professionally in England. And as good as he was on the football field, those who knew him off the pitch would also say that he was an even greater person off the pitch. I would like to send out birthday wishes to Millicent Brown, 97, went 97 on Tuesday. And this young lady, and I say young because if you looked at her, she looks like she's about, you know, in her 60s, you know, and she's 97 and still active and looks very good.
Great.
And I'd like to associate the entire house with these congratulatory remarks. I would also, like on the same vein, send out birthday wishes to a young lady who is slightly younger than Mrs. Brown, Viviana Durango Masan, who happens to live a little bit closer to me than Mrs. Brown. Ms. Brown is my constituent, and that is my wife, whose birthday is today. So thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any further speakers? The chair recognizes the Honorable Ben Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Mr. Acting Speaker, I would like to give congratulatory remarks to Bermuda's Pan American Games team that just completed in Santiago, Chile. Overall, great results throughout our team, multiple personal bests, also record set. I think it's important to point out that this time of year is not always the peak performance for a lot of our athletes. For them to go there and compete at that level is extremely important. But we'd have to give special thoughts to Connor White, who was able to come back with a bronze medal in cycling. So congratulations to our entire team and specifically to Connor White for his performance at the Pan American Games. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. There appear to be, Cousin Jason, Minister Jason Hayward. You have the floor, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to give special congratulatory remarks to my constituents who reside at 26 Euclid Avenue. Mrs. and Mr. and Mrs. Marilyn and Edward Burke will be celebrating their 50th anniversary. Yeah, veteran anniversary. And so that's an extremely special occasion.
Yes, indeed.
And so I'm sure the whole house would want to be associated with those two wonderful individuals.
Thank you. Thank you. Brother Famous, you are Honorable Member Famous. You are next.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start off with condolences to the family of Mrs. Betty Ann Darrell, sister of Honorable Michael Weeks. I also she was a resident of Devonshire. I also like to associate with the passing of Mr. David Cook. Also, Mr. Speaker, Mrs. Bernice Morton, the wife of George Morton Sr. Mrs. Jill Monis, my constituent. Let's just say my constituent. As the honorable member said, she lost her husband earlier this year, so my condolences to Stephen and his sister, and all of Devonites because they're very close up there. Miss Leslie Young, Mrs. Leslie Young of Devon Springwood, my constituent. I know she voted for me. Also, Mrs. Pearl Hodgson of Deepdale, C14, which is MP Wayne Kane's constituent. Well, Mr. Speaker, we spoke of Mr. Roberts, and Mr. Roberts' work was evident 25 years ago. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to give congratulations to the class of 1998, of which I believe somebody in here is one. That'd be you. Mr. Speaker, 25 years ago, I left my job at Belco I told my boss I'll be going out to the store. I came around Cool Street, and there were thousands of people lying in the street because the Progressive Labor Party had finally crossed the River Jordan. I don't say that lightly because we know that there were the MPs, but we also know there were the branches. And we also know there were the volunteers. There was a whole army of people that helped us to cross the River Jordan. So I would like to take a moment to thank everyone who took part in that 25 years ago. This year, we have lost many of the stalwarts, at least 5 that were part of that, including Mrs. Boris, who mortgaged her house for us to have Alaska home. So I just want to tell my colleagues in there, don't take for granted what happened 25 years ago, because the people still need us and they still want us. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for being part of that class of 1998. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me say before we do a minute's silence for the former honorable member Stanley Walter Roberts, that I'd like to send condolences out to the family. That's for me. For Ms. Bernice. Well, I guess it's going. For Ms. Bernice Morton, a constituent of number 5 in Hamilton Parish, a wonderful woman, the wife of George Morton, and she left also 3 children and a couple grandchildren. Yeah. Also June Beek, who was from Frog Alley. That's where I'm from. I knew her. She saw me grow up. And Dolores Glasswood, my cousin, who was eulogized on Sunday. And let me say that the Honorable Speaker, Dennis Lister, he more than eulogized Walter Roberts adequately. He done a very good job on that, and I think the whole House would have been proud of the Speaker's eulogy of Walter Roberts, and others eulogized him, but Lister was the main one. Thank you. Can we stand for a minute's silence? Let me set this thing. Thank you. The next order of business, matters of privilege, there are none. Personal explanations, there are none. Notice of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, none. Introduction of bills, there are none, I'm told. Government bills, none. Opposition bills, private member bills, and there's a notice of a motion on the floor. Mr. Weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Acting Speaker, I hereby give notice, and at the next day of meeting, the minister will move that the following resolution be approved. Be it resolved that this honorable House, in accordance with Section 2(1)(a) of the Acquisition of Land Act 1970, authorize the purchase of all that southernmost strip of land to be subdivided from land situated at 18 Secretary Lane, St. George's, GEO 5, in the island of Bermuda, as outlined in the agreement for sale made between Gardine Isetta Gibbons and the government of Bermuda.
Thank you, Minister Weeks. Any objections to that? There appear to be none. Orders of the day. Consideration of the speech, Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that consideration be given to the throne speech, which Her Excellency the Governor was pleased to open this present session of Parliament.
Thank you. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Jerry Richardson, will deliver that reply to the throne speech. Mr. Richardson, you have the floor. Thank you for reading, Mr. Richardson. Everybody got one? I certainly the speaker would like to follow. Thank you, sir. Mr. Richardson, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's my distinct honor to start this debate today on government's throne speech, and I look forward to the contributions to be made by all. This year's throne speech comes at a crucial time for us in Bermuda. In 2023, we fully expected to be back to normal following the global pandemic. Instead, we find ourselves navigating a new and potentially even more challenging or even more fundamental challenges to our way of life. Climate change, the global corporate tax, artificial intelligence, global conflicts are all going to fundamentally change the way we live. We can be sure that Bermuda will be forever changed in this generation. However, it falls on us to determine whether these changes will create a thriving Bermuda and a life of prosperity for our children or not. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda today is at a crossroads. Let's imagine what could be if we take the right path. Imagine a Bermuda where a new generation of small businesses are thriving. Our shops are bustling and our economy is growing every year, creating new jobs and new opportunities. Imagine a Bermuda where Bermudians don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, where our public schools provide students with a world-class education, creating a pipeline of talented individuals with the skills to get any job they want. Imagine a Bermuda where young people look forward to accessible home ownership, a decent standard of living, and affordable health care throughout their lives. Our communities will be cohesive, where people feel safe in their neighborhoods. Imagine a Bermuda where you can have confidence in the government to run the country as it should be, with effective government services, well-maintained roads and infrastructure, public transportation that runs on time, and carefully managed budgets with transparent and regularly audited accounts. Imagine waking up to hear that the government has implemented a plan to pay off our national debt. Imagine what a relief that would be to know that future generations won't be saddled with interest payments that cost more than most government ministries. Why should that be so much to ask? That surely is the very basis of what a government is elected to do. But the challenges of the future will demand even more than that. We will need a government that can provide a compelling vision of the future to stop current and next generations from fleeing the island. We will need a government that can manage the complexities of foreign direct investment, global corporate tax, and the myriad of international threats while saving money in the good years to provide for the bad. We will need a government that can not only pay down our debt, but is preparing for the future, for example, with an infrastructure fund to protect us from the impact of climate change. Mr. Speaker, this throne speech shows that our present government is not up to this task. Let me paint a picture of where we are today. Today's Bermuda is characterized by dangerous potholes and overgrown roads, sagging bridges, boarded up businesses, trees growing out of buildings, broken sidewalks choked in weeds, students fighting in town, antisocial behavior, uninsured families, joblessness, homelessness, trash piling up, canceled buses, hostile service providers, gang violence, broken-hearted mothers, missing fathers, logjam courts, closed hotels, skillless workers, self-medication, unsustainable workloads, unaffordable food and electricity, families devastated by alcohol and drugs, college graduates never able to give back into their community, companies pushing and twisting government into stooges and yes men, politicians of questionable character, soot drowning our white rooftops, road traffic fatalities, reckless driving, abandoned seniors, a swamped hospital, homes that take 2 lifetimes to pay off, banks that don't bank, regulators that don't regulate, gambling with casinos instead of opening them, media silenced by lawsuits, virtues like transparency, professionalism, and competence are becoming endangered qualities, unpaid taxes, unfunded pensions, the rich getting richer while the poor flee the island, our families scattered like refugees, retirees who can't retire, working until the day they die, an undermanned police service and regiment, hollow platitudes, unending victory laps, mediocre projects, self-promotion, more bureaucracy with less solutions, governors not housed in government house, parliament not meeting in parliament building, crowned by leaders who don't lead, and a government that does not govern for all. Our island and community is decaying around us. Our social virtues diminished with every act of violence, our financial security and future sacrificed with every budget deficit or outstanding pillar has changed dramatically. Even if the island's immigration policy was conducive to welcoming business partners, the simple fact is that companies need people on island less and less. The pandemic has shown that a great deal of the work which gets done in an office can just as easily be done from home. And thanks to technology, that home can now be anywhere in the world. But just as concerning is the disintegration of our social values. Some of our communities are being inundated with crime and drugs. Some of our families are related by blood, but don't share accommodation, resources, or hope for the future. We've heard in this honorable house how schools are recruiting grounds for gangs. And as we place more and more children in private education, the gap between Bermudians grows day by day. We no longer have the social balancing brought about by a well-staffed charity sector, service organizations, sports clubs, or optimal choices for childhood recreation. Insofar as political stability, we only need to look around these chambers. Mr. Speaker, an $8 billion economy with $1 billion in public spending and more than 4,000 government workers, and it's all overseen from a room smaller than a primary school auditorium. The staff of the legislature should be commended daily, operating with just enough resources to keep the people's business going, but certainly not enough to stand up against the government. Lest we forget, it is the government that answers to these honorable chambers and not the other way around. But equally, our affairs in this honorable house are challenged constantly. Debates are suddenly thrust upon us or mysteriously withdrawn. The dates of sittings held close to the chest of those in the know. Even the public benches can't see our faces anymore, and the regular business of the house is not televised. Laws are being introduced introduced and passed that slowly chew away the rights and privileges of this honorable House. Hence, this government does not need our permission for the special development order, which will reshape Southampton Parish forever. This decay in social value includes silencing the media with lawsuits and stonewalling efforts to obtain answers to simple questions. It seems like every day, more and more of Bermuda is just one big rubber stamp for this government. We in the One Bermuda Alliance constantly speak with people who are afraid to express their opinions about the government for fear of retribution. How ironic is it that in 2023, the fear of political retribution of the 20th century is still going strong? Entire companies, stakeholder groups, industry groups, and others must whisper their opinions out of fear they will lose permits and other documents needed to remain active and successful. Bermuda is on the ropes, and we cannot ignore that anymore. Mr. Speaker, it is possible to turn back this tide, but the mixed bag of previously announced initiatives in this year's throne speech isn't going to do it. This throne speech doesn't inspire or aspire to anything or offer any vision for Bermuda. Now, there are some key issues raised which the One Bermuda Alliance supports. More attention on uniformed services cadets is a strong way to not only streamline the entrance of young people into those careers, but provide needed early life lessons. Effectively implemented, this could go a long way to generating social values and understanding, forging friendships instead of rivalries. Equally, a single payment portal for all government services to pay online or via mobile device is a no-brainer. In 2023, paying for government services should be convenient and straightforward, and we're looking forward to seeing how one-stop shops for registrations, permits, and licensing will work. Mr. Speaker, the silver lining is short-lived, however, as there are too many tired old ideas which have already proven themselves problematic, if not entirely useless. Education reform delays may be blamed on heavy rain, but how devastating it must have for some of those parents arriving, primary school children arriving back at school in September to find they had nowhere to go. With the Bermuda Union of Teachers having called for the minister's resignation, it's even harder to see how reform, collaboration, and consultation will work going forward. The government's economic development strategy and the economic recovery plan are case studies in poor execution. And the government has already said for years and years and years that it will streamline planning, digitize immigration, and modernize public service. We even heard in 2021 about a cybersecurity bill, which clearly has not come to pass. Mr. Speaker, there are statements in this throne speech which are hard to understand. The government said, divisions cut deeper in smaller communities, and so it becomes even more important for us to center ourselves on those things that will improve the lives of all the people. Haven't we just spent the last 25 years in a concerted effort to blame, divide, isolate, and stigmatize each other? I submit that the leaders and beneficiaries of those efforts simply do not know how to unify our communities. And how about 40-year high global inflation has compounded the inequalities prevalent in our system. Yet we've been told that robust government action has contained this inflation, and yet it's being raised as the cause of our problems. It can't be both. And compliments becoming platitudes. Public officers have done an exceptional service to Bermuda. The public officers in Bermuda have been working in deteriorating conditions with anemic computers, challenging leadership, and a government that ignores them when it's politically convenient. Maybe the thank yous should be replaced by something more substantive. Finally, road users can start to see relief from less than ideal road conditions. I'll repeat that, less than ideal road conditions. That comment would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. Between road conditions and road behaviors, road fatalities are inevitable, and we see road collisions play out every single day now. There are ideas in this throne speech which run against the public interest. This government wants to amend the legislation governing Parliament. Admittedly, they have not said what they seek to change, but any government notorious for divisiveness, a lack of transparency, low levels of trust, known to have a slippery tongue with unfulfilled promises for governance legislation seems very ill-suited to make changes to Parliament. Again, it's supposed to be that this government answers to this honorable House, not the other way around. and the formation of a joint select committee to investigate and make recommendations from September's cyber attack is entirely inappropriate. How can the subject of an investigation, the government, form part of the investigating team? It would surprise no one if the committee spent its days bending over backward to cover up blame and diminish the litany of broken promises and failed initiatives for cybersecurity safety. Mr. Speaker, in the throne speech, it reads that the government will advance amendments to the Regulatory Act 2022, the Electricity Act 2016, and the Electronic Communications Act 2011 to provide for greater public protections in pricing determination and implementation. We have yet to solve the crisis arising last month from increases to electricity prices, despite assurances from the government that some relief will take place. Mr. Speaker, it isn't that these ideas are entirely without merit. The problem is that this government has proven time and again its own power and interests supersede those of the community. Mr. Speaker, there are actions a government can take to address our national challenges, and to be fair, some are hard, but no harder than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of a community where the content of character matters more than the color of skin, no more than Nelson Mandela's desire for an Africa which is in peace with itself. Our first step in saving our community is to dare boldly with fresh ideas and leave it to the cynics, bitter and resentful, to find new reasons to cower from change. Mr. Speaker, the cynical approach differs significantly from a well-functioning legislature. When done fairly with mutual respect and humility, an adversarial system of government works well. And those within that context are colleagues, even when they disagree. But there is a kind of behavior which seems to have replaced that. It's the land of political cynicism. Instead of working towards the best outcome, they believe that all political outcomes are one-sided, that there's an enemy, and that enemy is anyone who isn't on my side. We must let go of that masquerade. As US President John F. Kennedy said, let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democrat answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future. We in the OBA are constantly told by people how they don't want to participate in parliamentary democracy for fear of being publicly maligned and attacked. In Bermuda, we need a culture where cynics are recognized for what they are, critics in the very worst sense of the word. Mr. Speaker, US President Theodore Roosevelt said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." Mr. Speaker, to get out of this mess, it will take all of us working together with a clear vision of the potential of Bermuda. We can no longer afford to focus on settling old scores, pouring scorn and contempt on those different from us, or trying to bring about ideological fantasies. To get out of this extraordinary and once-in-a-lifetime challenge lands on the shoulder of every living Bermudian on this island. Earlier, I shared with you a vision of a prosperous Bermuda. Let me now share with you the path to get there. First, we have to get back to the basics of good governance. The census, the household expenditure survey, government audits are all examples of the unexciting yet vital work done by professionals behind the scenes. How many government reports are tabled in this honorable house that have caveats that accurate and up-to-date data is not available? Updating government guides such as public access to information statements will enable the public to navigate government services and other aspects of society. Elderly care is an example. It is a continuing challenge, and in an aging population, sandwiching working adults between childcare and senior care, the government must document and publish guidance and support. We should be listening to experts, balancing budgets, reallocating funds for unused positions, making early retirement easy, and prioritizing collecting taxes. This means funding and empowering the legislature so that committees can be held regularly, hearings conducted, testimony recorded, written submissions analyzed. This means a public schedule of meetings of the Houses of Parliament, oversight committees, and other organs which keep the government honest, effective, and accountable. And let's get the politics out of administration. Let's avoid stocking the boards of every quango with politicians and their political pairs. Not just those, but our regulators as well, and introduce accountability so that if an audit is missed or qualified, then board members get replaced. If the people of Bermuda are expected to be accountable for their actions according to our laws and values, then so must their leaders. Simultaneously, leaving the community alone and stop interfering with them and their interests. The job of government should be boring, and intrusion is permitted into a person's affairs only so much as it is necessary. This means slashing red tape. We don't have to handcuff the community to rules and regulations that serve no purpose other than this is the way it's always been done. No one thinks that the government should be involved in every aspect of Bermuda, especially business. Some things governments are just bad at. As Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman observed, if you put the government in charge of the Sahara Desert in 5 years, there'd be a shortage of sand. We have to make sure that we modernize our political institutions and ensure that good governance laws hold us as politicians accountable. Those of us who shirk our responsibility, behave unethically, or abuse our positions will have to go. If we as politicians don't lead from the front, then we are not leaders at all. This will ensure that politics is more accessible and acceptable, discouraging doubt, suspicion, and cynicism. This means higher participation rates in politics. This is key when holding referendums on socially progressive and culturally challenging issues. Let's get out of the community's way and sort ourselves out by getting back to basics. Mr. Speaker, second, making living in Bermuda easy. We need to create safe, healthy, sustainable communities. This starts with regular uniformed police, fire, and ambulance services. The volunteers and auxiliaries have been decimated with only a handful left. It wasn't that long ago that the Bermuda Police Reserves would relieve the full-time officers and take over patrolling the whole island. It's not enough to add more people to these roles, though. We need to make their jobs easier as well. It does no good having police officers spending hours filling out paperwork for outdated criminal offenses for which there are little to no punishment. And the same goes for everyone from our firefighters to our teachers, from our boat captains to our traffic wardens. Less paperwork means more doing. Mr. Speaker, we can and should put an end to the Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome style of road management. If someone wants to pop a wheelie along a main road, they won't be riding a bike again for a while. Speeding should not be tolerated. We have to make the punishment for road traffic offenses hurt to deter the conduct that is getting our people killed on our roads. And there should be a zero tolerance of gangs. Let's give those inadvertently swept up in gangs or those willing to walk away from that lifestyle a clear pathway out, with the very clear understanding that continuing on this particular highway ends with severe consequences. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda did not invent the laws of economics, but we do have to follow them. The cost of living in Bermuda is lowered by having more people in Bermuda, period. Our economists have made it abundantly clear for years that more people equals less cost. We have been breaking ourselves up against this economic principle for some 25 years. We can call the experiment a failure and get back to populating the island. Yes, we will have to attend to the myriad of risks that come with this, but better that than our people fleeing the island. With clear eyes, a rational approach, public accountability, and a respect for all, we can manage a population increase that is to the benefit of Bermudians. For example, housing. How terribly ironic is it that somehow, in the absence of people, we still don't have sufficient housing stock? It's clear that guest workers alone are not the sole cause of a lack of housing. We have to change where and how people live in Bermuda. We have to change how we interact with housing owners. We have to change what role the government plays in housing. So yes, there is some complexity, and yes, it's a big problem. But again, the other option is to make Bermuda so expensive, no Bermudians can live here. Our self-induced isolation has resulted in self-inflicted wounds to our community. And by expanding programs for first-time homeowners, we can ensure Bermudians get on the property ladder and don't get caught up in this problem. Mr. Speaker, third, we need to ensure these problems do not rise again by implementing a world-class education for our children. Let's remove politics from education. I think the community has had enough of our political theories and motivations pushing and pulling at our students. An independent education authority means just that. No friends and family on the board, no favorite contractors, and no politicians giving thinly veiled threats under the premise of legitimate direction. It should not take reading shark oil to figure out the basics in the education system. And let's let the school supervisors, principals, and others get on with managing their schools. When did the judgment of an academic embedded in bureaucracy supersede that of the principal, who knows every student's name, every parent's job, and the timing of every bus that comes to that school? And the students don't all need to be accountants and lawyers. Mr. Speaker, our country needs more skilled trades professionals. For a country built by the trades, which includes vendors, shop owners, and the like, we seem to totally forget it was sweat that built our homes and communities. Because of the first step, getting back to basics, we will have the statistical information to ascertain what skills are needed in the market, and the professionals in the Education Authority, properly legislated to produce results, in a position to develop curriculum that equips Bermudians to work, live, raise families, and retire in Bermuda. And we can further support these professionals, especially small business owners, through easy-to-access business directories and other easily understood support services. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda has to be a thriving community again. Our appetite for the arts also has to be addressed. It does us little good to live in a community with clean roads if our minds are overgrown with constant nonsense. We need our artists and athletes to inspire and uplift us by bringing their visions into our communities and by encouraging international connections and partnerships. Mr. Speaker, it always seems impossible until it's done. Let's get back to basics. Let's make the systems of government work again. Let's make living in Bermuda easy again. Let's make sure these problems don't arise again. But in order to achieve this, we can't keep going down the road this throne speech is taking us. We need to be willing to change, work toward the Bermuda imagined, led by leaders that lead by example, that listen to all voices in Bermuda, are willing to work with experts and diverse thinkers with whom accountability matters, who act with integrity and always puts the voters first. Imagine that, Bermuda. And now, let's get to it together.
Thank you, Member. And before I recognize the next speaker, I would like to put to the House that the hour is now 12:25. And for the next speaker,